Shares of QuantumScape are absolutely booming today, up about 30%. I'm Jason Hall. This is Investing Unscripted. We're going to take a closer look at what's going on with QuantumScape that has the stock booming today, and then stretch it out and talk about the longer term implications behind it, whether now is a time investors should still buy, even with the stock up so much today. This video is sponsored by The Motley Fool. If you're looking for even more great stock ideas, you should check out our special link. It's fool.com/unscripted. You go to that special link, you can get access to the Motley Fool's 10 best stocks to buy right now. Check out that offer. It's something that can make you a better investor. All right, let's get to it. Here's what's going on with QuantumScape stock. You can see it just absolutely rocketed in pre-trading. Pre-market trading was up more than 40% at one point. Been a little bit up and down, but it's still about 30% higher than it closed at yesterday. And the market's down a little bit. S&P's down about 1/3%. QQQ Trust, which is the NASDAQ 100, is down about 1.4% today. So what's happening that's got the stock rallying on kind of a down day for the market? You still got concerns about the economy, inflation. Markets are still holding out hope that we're going to see interest rate cuts later this year, but it's less clear that that's necessarily going to happen. What is going on with QuantumScape stock? Well, big news from one of its most important, probably its most important and its biggest partner. That's Volkswagen. So the company announced an agreement, a licensing agreement with part of Volkswagen to license its solid state battery technology to really start seeing it move towards commercial production. I'm going to bring up the press release and we'll talk about it. Okay, so you see the title here. PowerCo and QuantumScape announced a landmark agreement to industrialize solid state batteries. So PowerCo, the most generic name in the world, that's part of Volkswagen. That's its battery company. They started it in 2022, partnered with QuantumScape. Of course, Volkswagen is an equity investor in QuantumScape, invested in QuantumScape before it went public, and is one of the vehicle OEMs that has worked closely with it as it has been scaling up its technology, refining it. And here's where things are right now. The deal, in short, licenses QuantumScape's technology to PowerCo to manufacture up to 40 gigawatt hours of batteries with QuantumScape's technology, with the option to expand it up to 80 gigawatt hours initially. So we're looking at 80 gigawatt hours. I'm going to go down here to the bottom. Hope I'm not making you dizzy, but this is the key. PowerCo is looking to build out up to 200 gigawatt hours per year of manufacturing capacity across 3 facilities. So that 80 gigawatts would represent about 40% of its potential manufacturing capacity across those 3 factories once they get there. Now, what does this really mean for QuantumScape? One, I think it is a massive, massive vote of confidence, right? That the technology continues to improve. We've seen over the past couple of years, their technology has moved from, of course, my good friend Tyler Crow, that I've made some videos about QuantumScape with, called it a science experiment. Maybe that's a little bit giving it not quite enough credence, but it basically moved out of a engineering and science lab and university to publicly traded company, startup, to where we are now, where they are actually not that far from commercial manufacturing, potentially sometime in the next year, which is pretty remarkable that they've moved that quickly. Now, let's take it to the next step and talk about what QuantumScape has accomplished that is behind PowerCo and Volkswagen giving it this vote of confidence to say, look, we're ready to get that licensing agreement in place, start scaling up. We want to be ready to hit the ground running and manufacture this as soon as it's commercially viable. I've got a couple of slides here from QuantumScape's quarterly earnings last quarter that talk about the addressable market and talk about some of the challenges and the opportunities that EV manufacturers need to address to adopt more of this market. So it's 13% of EVs making up the light vehicle market globally. That's up a lot from where it was. That market share is increasing, but it's still a tiny portion of global auto sales. Now, key things that are part of the challenge to move beyond these early adopters to move it to mass market: range. We know that's an issue. So many of the EVs out there get less than 250 miles of range on average. Somewhere between 200 and 275 is usually pretty typical. The length of charging is an issue, that needs to move from hours to minutes to be able to charge, just like you can with, a gasoline or diesel vehicle. Safety continues to be a concern with the current state of batteries, the liquid and gel state. Lithium batteries out there, there's concerns about safety, heating, and the battery swelling and having issues like that. And a big one is cycle life. So anybody that's ever had a smartphone, you know that by year 2 or 3, your charge is not going to last as long as it did that first year or so that you had it. And that's not acceptable for a vehicle. You can't buy a car that has 300 miles of range and 3 years later has 200 miles of range. That's completely unacceptable, right? So those are all things that are important to address. And of course, cost, right? Costs need to continue to fall because the batteries are the most expensive single component for electric vehicles right now. I want to look at one more slide here before we kind of get to the point of wrapping up the video and talk about the accomplishments that the company has made. And this is something Tyler and I've talked about before on our prior videos about QuantumScape. So if you want to look back through our channel at other QuantumScape videos to kind of get the cadence of what the company has done, the company's set, I don't know if I would necessarily agree with ambitious goals. And the reason I say that is because they've actually hit them. And that's important because you think about, I'll use Tesla as an example. Tesla has been pretty bad at hitting goals when they say they would hit them, but they've also done incredible things because they've had wildly ambitious goals. Even coming short of those wildly ambitious goals, Tesla has done incredible, incredible things in the EV space, which we know. But we do know that QuantumScape has done an incredible job of really consistently showing progress, incredible progress from where they were coming out of the lab and really trying and going to commercial startup, raising capital, and then moving closer and closer to manufacturing. So some big milestones really over the past year and a half or so, getting some initial sample cells out to OEMs to test. Those sample cells doing incredibly well in terms of cycle testing. How well do they maintain the maximum amount of charge over time? So you don't see that shorter and shorter range as you go through more and more cycles, like we talked about with the cell phone. Just really, really great performance, which we know is the key thing behind solid state. We know solid state will take charges faster, right? And we're starting to see clear evidence that you get that the longevity of the batteries look to be really, really good. They're starting to get into the process of shipping out a prototype from production. And that's really, really important. We see that in the upper right under product development. Getting those QSE5 prototypes, they're actually coming off a production line is a really big step because that's demonstrating not just that the technology is good, but that it can be manufactured. That is such a critical part to it. And then building off of that success later this year, and then in 2025, when we actually start moving into production, is Raptor and Cobra, which are their two technologies behind the process of manufacturing the separator and actually the production itself. So more progress needs to be made before this big landmark deal with PowerCo, with Volkswagen's battery manufacturing arm, is going to matter. But the key point here, and I just want to hit on this real quick before we wrap up and talk about whether I think QuantumScape is a buy at this point, is they've been so good at hitting these goals in the past. And you see Volkswagen say, okay, let's do the licensing deal now, get that in place. It's pretty clear that the technology is viable at this point. We know that. It charges quickly. The evidence is clear that it holds charge long, and you don't see that degradation of the batteries with lots of cycles like we do with a lot of lithium-ion technologies. So those two things are super duper important. Now we just got to see the ability to be able to manufacture it. And they're starting to show some evidence of that too with Cobra and with Raptor, right? So we're starting to see more proof of that. Now, the big question a lot of investors are asking, is now time to be buying QuantumScape stock? And this is where I think the answer really hasn't changed very much. Tyler and I, in our other videos, we've both been pretty steadfast about our view on this, and I think it's still the same. For an investor like Tyler, who's more conservative, looking for like actual revenues and commercial success, it's probably not the time. If that's the kind of investor you are, it's probably not the time to be buying QuantumScape stock because this is a big vote of confidence from Volkswagen, but it's not a done deal, right? They still haven't actually started putting production lines in place for commercial manufacturing, producing commercial product, right? We're still at least a year, probably at least a year short of that. And the other thing to remember too is Volkswagen is making a lot of bets. They did a deal with RIVN just a couple of weeks ago, up to $5 billion deal Part of that is they made an investment directly in RIVN. They might buy more RIVN stock at the market price based on hitting some certain qualifications. And also they've committed to funding a joint venture with RIVN. So this is not a bet where Volkswagen's 100% married to QuantumScape. So I think that's really important to remember and not to put too much emphasis on what Volkswagen is doing with QuantumScape and ignoring everything else that Volkswagen is doing. It's one of the largest manufacturers in the world. They're committing billions of dollars in lots of ways to EVs besides just QuantumScape. So that context is really important. With that said, if you're more of an investor like me, I'm willing to have a part of my portfolio that I invest in more of the startup moonshot sort of stocks that I see viability and potential, but there's still a lot of work to do to get there. Then I think if that's you, maybe now might be a great time to buy it, because the bottom line is that this stock is tons down from its all-time high. But at its all-time high, it was like a 50 or 60 billion dollar company, which was wildly out of range of what it was even close to being able to do. If you look at the recent market cap, we're talking single-digit billions of dollars, and this is a business that could get a lot larger if it is successful. So again, if you're willing to risk that capital that things don't go well, then I think maybe now is still a good time to buy shares. You have to remember, though, if it goes well, it could go wildly well, but there is still a very, very good chance that it doesn't. And if it doesn't go well, honestly, I think investors are probably going to lose a lot of money. I'm willing to stake a little bit of money that I might lose most or all of it if that happens, on the chance, based on the evidence that we've seen so far, that if this is successful, it could be enormously successful and profitable for shareholders.